Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the 11th seminar of the International Interdisciplinary PhD in Progress seminar series, Phase 4, organized by the Global South Network. I would like to start the session by thanking the organizer of this weekly seminar series, Dr. Numan Raayat, who is a lecturer in law at Leicester Law School, as well as being the founder and the chief convener of the Global South Network. As the chair of today's session, let me briefly introduce all the panelists to you. To start with myself, I'm Dr. Zeynep Tuğba Sungur, an assistant professor at the Social Sciences University of Ankara in Turkey. I received my PhD degree in area studies from Middle East Technical University in 2020, where I previously worked as a research assistant. In my PhD, I worked on the idea of nation as constructed by the state in the discourse of education, including the textbooks, in Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Following PhD, I conducted postdoctoral research at SOAS, University of London, for a year. Joining my current institution in 2023, I have been working on the sociology of South Asia, covering Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, as well as Iran. Along with academic work, I also provide training and consultancy for international organizations such as the IOM, UNHCR, and Presidency of Migration Management in Republic of Turkey. Let me now pass on to the discussant for today's session, who is Dr. Zulfiya Abawi, who is a lecturer in global business at the Faculty of Business and Creative Studies at University of South Wales. Zulfiya focuses on delivering dynamic applied business education through real-world problem solving and interdisciplinary learning. At the University of South Wales, she has developed curricula aligned with the USW 23 strategy, emphasizing challenge-based learning, collaboration, and industry management. Zulfiya's research explores the intersection of decolonial theory, legal pluralism, and gender, particularly in post-conflict settings. She critically analyzes how colonial biases in legal frameworks impact social justice, especially women's agency, using Afghanistan's 2004 constitution as a case study. Now let me introduce you our peer commentators. In fact, today we have two peer commentators. The first one is Amanullah Ahmadzai, who is a PhD student and part-time tutor at the Edinburgh University Law School. He has been tutoring at courses like dispute resolution methods, international commercial arbitration, and commercial law ordinary. Before moving to the UK, Amanullah taught at Kabul University, Faculty of Law and Political Science, as well as other private higher education institutions in Kabul. He taught subjects like commercial law, private international law, media law, and international organizations. Besides teaching, he served in the legal judicial sector of Afghanistan, working as a senior specialist for the Appeals Board of the Independent Administrative Reform and Civil Service Commission of Afghanistan. Until the political changes in August 2021, he was working as Justice General Director for Kabul City at the Ministry of Justice. He was a member of the Afghan Bar Association and a member and founder of the Afghan US Law Alumni Association. Our second peer commentator is Mohammad Mustafa Raheal, who is a research assistant at the Faculty of Education and Society at University College London. Besides being a PhD candidate at University of Bath, Department of Social Policy Sciences. Here he plays a pivotal role in projects under the guidance of Dr. Naomi Pandal and in a Nuffield-funded research project titled Afghan Refugee Settlement in the UK, Outcomes and Experiences, which is led by Dr. Caroline Oliver. A recipient of the prestigious Chevening Scholarship, Mustafa is also recognized as a British Council Scholar, which fully funds his ongoing PhD. His accolades include being an ambassador for One Young World, a Johnson & Johnson Fellow, a Women Deliver Young Leader for supporting women scholars, a recipient of the Counterpart International Emerging Civil Society Leaders Program, a Friedrich Ebert Stiftung Young Leader Fellow, and the 2015 National University's Debating Champion for Afghans for Progressive Thinking. And last, but certainly not the least, today's guest speaker is Fawzia Ehsani, who is a PhD student at the University of York, specializing in post-conflict governance and capacity management in Afghanistan. Fawzia held key leadership roles in Afghanistan's Ministry of Transport and Civil Aviation, including Director of Foreign Relations and Legal Affairs and Deputy Minister. She also served as an advisor to the ministry and contributed to national reconciliation efforts. Fawzia is an active member of various networks focusing on women's roles in peace processes and post-conflict recovery. Her current research examines the challenges in Afghanistan's civil aviation sector, particularly the failure of the international capacity development initiatives. Fawzia's work bridges theory and practice, offering insights into the complexities of state building in post-conflict countries. Today, Fawzia will present her project titled The Key Obstacles to Capacity Development in Post-Conflict Countries, the case of Afghanistan's civil aviation sector between 2001 and 2021. Fawzia, you will have 3 to 35 minutes for your presentation, followed by 5 minutes for comments and questions, both from the discussant and the peer commentators. If time permits, we will then have a 15-minute Q&A session with the attendees. So, Fawzia, the floor is now all yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for taking the time to listen to my presentation today. As Dr. Zainab introduced me earlier, my name is Fawzia Ehsani, and I'm third-year PhD student at the University of York. The focus of my research is the key obstacles to capacity development in post-conflict countries, with a specific case study on Afghanistan civil aviation sector between 2001 and 2021. In today's presentation, I will briefly outline Afghanistan civil aviation sector and the challenges it faces in post-conflict settings. I will explain why, despite international investment, capacity development efforts struggled, and I will share my research question. Next, I will cover my methodology. Finally, I will present my initial findings, focusing on key themes as security, legitimacy, and reconstruction in Afghanistan civil aviation sector. As you may recall, please go back to the first. Yeah, as you may recall, following the tragic event of 9/11, the international community led by United States intervened in Afghanistan in response to the Taliban regime harboring Osama bin Laden and other Al-Qaeda members. This intervention was backed by several United Nations Security Council resolutions, which called for the establishment of security and dismantling of terrorist network in Afghanistan. Initially, the primary goal of the international intervention was to establish security in Afghanistan and prevent the country from becoming a safe haven for international terrorism. However, as the intervention progressed, the international community recognized the need to support a state-building effort, not only to ensure long-term peace, but also to address the deep political, social, and economic challenges faced by Afghanistan. Civil aviation was identified as a key sector for rebuilding, given its critical role in socio-economic development of any country. For Afghanistan, a landlocked nation, civil aviation was particularly vital due to significant geographical challenges such as a high transport cost, logistical difficulties, and limited connectivity to key global market. And civil aviation played a crucial role in facilitating the deployment of international forces to Afghanistan, serving as the primary route for their arrival. At its peak, more than 200,000 international forces were stationed in the country. Consequently, the development of Afghanistan civil aviation sector was regarded as a fundamental component of its state building process. Following the international intervention in Afghanistan after the 9/11, the military presence played a significant role in the management of Afghanistan aviation. The country's four main international airports were controlled by different countries, each providing security and overseeing air services and airspace. As you can see in the picture, Mazar Sharif Airport in north controlled by Germany, Herat Airport in west controlled by Italy, Kabul Airport in central controlled by Turkey, and Kandahar Airport in south controlled by United States. The military personnel often stationed in Afghanistan as part of NATO, ISAF, or other international security forces managed various aspects of airport operations, including air traffic control, security, fire and rescue services, and most importantly, airspace management and some other part of the air service management. Their involvement was essential for maintaining security, but it's created limitation in terms of Afghan personnel participation in the operational aspects of these airports. While this military oversight was crucial for ensuring security and stability, it also bypassed local Afghan governance and expertise. This reliance on foreign personnel contributed to the weakening of local capacity in managing aviation services, preventing Afghanistan from gaining full control over its airspace and airports until 2014. However, I would like to mention here that the international forces had planned to take over all the air service and airspace management to Afghans until 2014, but it was not possible because of lack of capacity among the civil aviation personnel. They couldn't, meet, this goal and hand over all the air service and air space management to Afghan. However, I say here the full control, but after 2014, they gradually allowed some Afghans to also come and took some responsibility for the airspace management. Based on SIGA report, until 2014, from 2001 to 2015, the United States alone invested more than $500 million into Afghanistan civil aviation sector. However, it is difficult to differentiate how much of that amount went toward infrastructure development versus human resource capacity building. Given this substantial investment, a key question arises here. Why, after the international community withdrawal in August 2021, did all airports collapse? Despite the millions of dollars spent on developing both infrastructure and human resources, when the international forces left, no local Afghan authorities were able to take full control of the airspace and air service management. This question sets the stage of understanding the key obstacles that hindered Afghanistan's ability to independently manage its civil aviation sector. These obstacles include institutional weakness, security concern, over-reliance on external international expertise, and bypassing of local governance in key decisions. Let's now explore the main arguments in details. We established the context of Afghanistan civil aviation sector and the international investment made to rebuild it. Let's turn to the key obstacles that hindered capacity development in the sector. The Afghan Civil Aviation Authority, or ACAA, suffered from poor governance, mismanagement, and lack of strategic direction. The ACAA was unable to develop the necessary structure and leadership to manage the sector independently. These weaknesses were not adequately addressed by international advisors, leading to a reliance on foreign experts who did not always align with the local needs. Two, although security was a key concern, it was often used as an excuse for broader institutional failure. For instance, local aviation staff were not trusted with aerospace management and were bypassed in favor of military control, even after significant investment were made in training Afghan personnel. The military control of key airports such as Kabul, Kandahar, Mazar-Sharif, Herat severely limited to involvement of Afghan personnel in air service management and even aerospace management. This control prevented the development of local capacity and ensured that foreign experts remained in charge, further hindering Afghanistan's self-sufficiency in aviation. The international community often bypassed local governance in favor of direct involvement from external contractor and military personnel. This sidelining of the Afghan government and local experts created a system of dependency on foreign personnel, undermining Afghanistan's ability to independently manage its aviation sector in the long run. And finally, despite years of investment, Afghanistan remained dependent on foreign expertise for technical aspects of aviation management. This over-reliance also left the country vulnerable when the international forces withdrew in 2021. The lack of local capacity meant that once external personnel left, there was no one effectively take over. This obstacle raised critical questions about the sustainability of capacity development initiative in post-conflict countries. Specifically, how can countries like Afghanistan overcome institutional weakness, security challenges, and foreign dependency to ensure that capacity development offers have long-lasting effects? Let's explore this question further in the context of Afghanistan's civil aviation sector. At the core of my research is one key question: why were capacity development initiatives in Afghanistan's civil aviation sector between 2001 and 2021 so ineffective? To answer this question, I've explored several sub-questions focusing on specific aspects that contributed to the sector's challenges. I don't want to, write one by one of all of this question. I want to just to say that my sub-question. It is the first one is about the capacity development strategy, institutional challenges, power disparities, bypassing local governance, impact of insecurity. As I delved into the existing literature on capacity development in post-conflict countries, I noticed that while there is significant work on the challenges of security, legitimacy, and governance in these settings, there is a gap in understanding the specific obstacles faced by countries like Afghanistan in sectors such as civil aviation. Many studies talk about the theoretical framework around state building, but they tend to focus on broad themes without addressing the on-the-ground challenges that actually occur during the rebuilding process. For example, while we know the security issue plays a role, everybody might agree with this, there is limited research on how security concerns were used as an excuse to cover broader failure in institutional capacity. I will explain more and discuss more about this challenge, that how the security concerns sometimes used as an excuse. Another key gap I identified is that the lack of attention to the strategies of international organizations, that I will also explain more about this, that for instance, we know that organizations like the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, UNDP, and USAID, and UNAPS were heavily involved in Afghanistan, but the actual impact of their strategy and whether they were aligned with the local needs remained remains under explored. The literature doesn't adequately examine how external actors may have unknowingly reinforced local weaknesses rather than helping to address them. My research aims to fill this gap by examining the interplay between international strategy, local governance, and capacity development in Afghanistan civil aviation sector. I look at how insecurity, institutional weakness, and bypassing of Afghan governance affected the effectiveness of capacity development initiatives. This focus brings a new insight into the broader discussion of post-conflict reconstruction and state building. Now that we established the gaps in existing literature, I will explain the methodology I used to, next one, I was talking about it too. Now that we established the gap in existing literature, I've explained the methodology I used to explore this issue in depth and how I gather data from key Afghan and international aviation experts. For my research, I've used a state building theory to guide my analysis and Afghanistan civil aviation sector. This theory focusing on the key element needed for rebuilding a country after conflict, security, legitimacy, and effective reconstruction. I choose this framework because it directly addresses the challenges Afghanistan faced in developing its civil aviation capacity. The state building theory suggests that for post-conflict countries to succeed, they must rebuild a strong institution, establish trust among citizens and international community, and ensure long-term security. In my case, I've used this theory to assess how security concern, institutional weaknesses, and the lack of legitimacy impacted capacity development in the civil aviation sector. This approach helps explain why, despite substantial investment, Afghanistan struggled to build the necessary capacity to manage its aviation sector independently after the international withdrawal in 2021. Okay, with this theoretical framework in mind, I used a qualitative research approach to investigate this issue further. Now I will walk you through the methodology I used for my studies. So in this research, I relied on both primary and secondary data. The primary data came from semi-structured interview with 16 Afghan and international elites involved in Afghanistan civil aviation sector. Given the security risk and the geographical dispersion of my interviewees, all interviews were conducted virtually via Zoom. I faced a few challenges along the way. Building trust with Afghan interviewees, especially those inside Afghanistan, was tough. Some were concerned about confidentiality because they are well-known figure. So I had to make extra efforts to assure them that their privacy was my top priority. Despite this hurdles, the virtual format actually facilitated access to participants who would have been difficult to reach otherwise. It also ensured that I could gather diverse perspective from individuals based in different countries. This approach ultimately allowed me to gain valuable insight into the obstacle facing in Afghanistan civil aviation sector. For the data analysis, I adopted a thematical analysis approach, which helped me identify patterns and recurring themes from the interviews. This method was particularly effective for my research as it allowed me to explore the nuanced experiences of Afghan and international elites involved in Afghanistan civil aviation sector. The process started with transcribing all interviews, which I then imported into NVivo For coding, I applied an inductive approach, meaning the codes and themes emerge directly from the data rather than being based on pre-existing categories. Through this, I was able to capture both expected and unexpected insight. The main theme that emerged from the data were security and military interferences, organizational and structural failure, and the main theme was security, legitimacy, and reconstruction. And under the security and military interference theme, I identify several key codes that reflect how military presence and interventions disrupted Afghanistan's civil aviation sector. First was the bypassing civil aviation personnel in aerospace and air service management by the military. I will explain more later. Military presence preventing civil aviation personnel from on-the-job training, lack of trust of the military in civil aviation personnel in case of security. Together, these codes reveal how military dominance not only hindered the professional growth of civil aviation personnel, but also obstructed capacity development efforts by limiting their involvement in key operational activity. Under the legitimacy theme, I identify several key codes that reflect the challenges to establishing and maintaining the credibility of Afghanistan civil aviation sector. Nepotism, that how widespread favors nepotism in recruitment and promotion processes undermine the sector's legitimacy. Second is lack of proper regulatory body, the absence of an independent and effective regulatory body authority weakened oversight and enforcement mechanism. And lastly is the low salaries in Afghanistan civil aviation compared to other countries in the region. These codes reveal how internal governance failure. I would like to say that most of these codes are, front and back. Some of these codes might also used in another theme as well, like the low salaries that also might use in the next theme as an effective reconstruction. The last theme is reconstruction, the effective reconstruction that is covers several codes like the fragmented foreign program lacked coordination, leading to inefficiencies of capacity development, training challenges, human resource retention, dependence on foreign expertise, infrastructure versus capacity development. I would like to say here, I'm still in the data analysis process and stage, and it is not the final finding, but it is kind of initial finding. A major obstacle to capacity development in Afghanistan civil aviation sector, as highlighted by nearly all interviews, both Afghan and international, was the military presence at the international airports. According to these interviews, the extensive presence of international military forces significantly hindered the ability of Afghan personnel to engage in critical training and gain the hands-on experience necessary for capacity development. The military forces focuses on confidentiality and security led to a lack of trust in Afghan personnel, which meant that they were often bypassed in key operational areas within the airports. Even those Afghan personnel who were fortunate enough to participate in training abroad faced challenges upon their return. Due to the military ongoing lack of trust, many of them were not allowed to apply their new skills or undergo on-the-job training in Afghanistan. This situation created a disconnect between the knowledge gained abroad and its practical application back home. Additionally, despite international goals to transfer full control of air service and aerospace management, as I mentioned earlier, to Afghan authority, the military dominance role persisted until 2014. The Seagull report in 2015 confirms that the military control over air service and airspace management was a significant challenge, as Afghan personnel lacked the necessary capacity to assume this responsibility. Consequently, NATO contractor continued to oversee this critical operation until the international withdrawal. The lack of a viable transfer of power in these key areas illustrates the broader challenges of trust and capacity development in post-conflict Afghanistan. In recurring concern among interviews, both Afghan and international again, was the role of nepotism in the selection of personnel for international training programs. According to the majority of interviewees, the Civil Aviation Authority frequently selected individuals for training based on their personal connections to top leadership figures, rather than their qualifications or potential to contribute to the sector's long-term capacity development. This system of patronage created a significant barrier to legitimacy, as it's undermined the idea of fair, merit-based professional advancement. In addition to issue of nepotism, many interviews point out the absence of the proper regulatory body within the Civil Aviation Authority. Without the well-established independent regulatory body, the ACAA struggled to maintain oversight and ensure the international and domestic program adhere to a standard, hindering the sector's credibility and long-term sustainability. Another critical issue raised was salary disparities. Interviewees noted that Afghan civil aviation personnel were paid significantly lower wage compared to their counterparts in neighboring countries. This salary gap not only created inequities, but also led to high turnover rates and difficulty in retaining qualified personnel, further destabilizing the legitimacy of ACAA. One of the major findings in the reconstruction process of Afghanistan civil aviation sector was the lack of coordination between foreign programs. Multiple countries and international organizations set up their own capacity development initiatives without aligning their goals, leading to a fragmented approach. Each foreign entity focused on its own priorities, which often resulted in overlapping training programs, inefficiency, and a lack of integration between the various training efforts. For example, some of foreign countries, actually I can say all of these foreign countries who were placed in 4 international airports, concentrated on training air traffic controllers, while other critical areas such as aviation safety, fire and rescue, maintenance, and airspace management, and some other skills that was needed. As SIGAR also, in the SIGAR reports, they mentioned that more than 200 air traffic controllers were trained by different foreign countries in Afghanistan, while some other important and essential component of air service management was overlooked by foreign countries. This disjointed approach not only wasted resources, but also failed to address the broader long-term needs of Afghanistan civil aviation sectors. As a result, the country's civil aviation system struggled to develop a holistic workforce capable of running the airports effectively and managing airspace. This lack of integration and collaboration between different foreign countries prevented the establishment of unified strategy for capacity development and limited the sustainability of improvement made during the foreign-led reconstruction period. Several significant challenges emerged related to the training and capacity development program in Afghanistan civil aviation sector. First and foremost, there was no independent budget allocated for training, seminar, or courses within the Civil Aviation Authority. As a result, these programs were almost entirely funded by international organizations or foreign countries, who often dictated the types of training and workshops offered. However, many of these programs were not aligned with the specific needs of Afghanistan civil aviation sector. As discussed earlier, foreign programs were fragmented and lacked a needs assessment or consultation with Afghan personnel, leading to irrelative or overlapping training initiatives. Another significant issue was the outdated curriculum at the Civil Aviation Institute in Afghanistan, which struggled to provide relevant and up-to-date training. However, crucial additional challenge was that the Civil Aviation Institute in Afghanistan, which was placed inside the Kabul airport, was not certified by the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO. As a result, any certificates or a license issued by the institute were not recognized internationally. This lack of certification meant that personnel trained in Afghanistan Civil Aviation Institute could not apply their qualifications in other countries, and their credential held little value in the broader aviation industry. Moreover, even within Afghanistan, many of these trained at the institute faced limited career opportunities within the country's civil aviation sector, as their training did not meet the international standards required for key roles. This was a major obstacle to capacity development of skilled, self-sufficient workforces in Afghanistan aviation sector. Finally, the lack of coordination in training program abroad, combined with the absence of follow-up and on-the-job training upon returning to Afghanistan, meant that many personnel struggle to apply their knowledge in real-world context. As highlighted by the interviews, even those who completed training abroad often face challenges in reintegrating into Afghanistan civil aviation environment due to lack of opportunities for practical experience. Human resource retention emerged as a critical challenge for Afghanistan civil aviation sector, particularly regarding those personnel who had received training abroad. One of the most significant barriers to retaining trained personnel was the lack of available position within the Civil Aviation Authority. According to both Afghan and international interviews, upon returning from international training programs, many individuals found that there were no vacant position within the organization to accommodate their newly acquired skills and qualification this absence of unoccupied roles mean that many skilled individuals were forced to leave the civil aviation sector altogether and seek employment in other organizations. Last one, several interviews, both Afghan and international, emphasized that the overemphasize on infrastructure development, like the construction of 64 airports in Afghanistan, was not aligned with the country's actual needs. Afghanistan, with its limited population and geographic size, required far fewer airports, but foreign countries and international organizations prioritize visible projects like infrastructure to legitimize their presence. To conclude, I'm still in the process of analyzing the data, and I can't yet say whether the capacity development program were effective, ineffective, or somewhere in between. However, what is clear is that significant investment were made in the civil aviation sector, with various training programs organized and resources allocated. At the same time, it is important to highlight that many of the qualified and licensed personnel were evacuated by foreign countries and international organizations after the collapse of Afghanistan to the Taliban. This has had a major impact on the sustainability and long-term successes of this program. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will conclude my presentation here.
Okay. Thank you very much, Fawzia, for sharing this important work with us. I'm sure both our discussants and peer reviewers will have many points to be added. So without taking much of your time, I'd like to invite our discussant, Zulfiya, to share comments now on Fawzia's work. Over to you, Zulfiya.
Thank you so much, Fawzia. I loved your presentation. It's so many things that I work on, but from a different industry, basically in Afghanistan. And also, I really like your empirical evidence and the amount of empirical evidence you're engaging with. I just have one question in terms of the participants. You've mentioned that you're engaging with interviewed the elites, and my question is why only elites? The reason, the rationale behind this question is because when I look at things in the context of Afghanistan, a lot of the things was top down. And I'm engaging with decolonization and coloniality of knowledge, what happens is that even in some countries which has been colonized, it's the elites who make a pact. The people who are being affected, they are not part of the process. So it could be because of restrictions of getting in touch and finding people on the ground, but perhaps even if it's one or two, it can diversify the findings of your research. That is about the participants. Another one is about the theoretical framework. A lot of the things you said, it's you can hear it also from people. Again, it's very strong empirical evidence that you're engaging with. I was hoping, because you're in the process of data analysis and data collection, is strengthening the theoretical foundation of your work. And also it comes down to the PhD training. It depends on the university and the department and what they ask you, like what they want from you. In organizations, universities I have worked, they want to have a theory, a strong theoretical foundation. And I don't know if I don't know how much time you have, perhaps maybe you want to look into decolonization. And I had other colleagues and peers from Afghanistan, and they said, well, Afghanistan was never decolonized. Why shall we even speak about decolonization? But I think the theory and also the conversations happening in the literature on decolonization, it can help you recognize, even when you're looking into capacity building strategies and framework, it can give you a deeper insight into why things were happening the way they were happening. Like, for example, sidelining of Afghans. A lot of the things when you look into colonization and decolonization is because there was a mindset. They were like, these are victims. And instead of asking them, what do you want? International community went and said, hey, here's what you need. And some of them have been completely sidelined. And there are also kind of these ideas like, okay, the supremacy of the Western epistemology and all of that. So, but again, thank you. Just a few thoughts and questions.
Thanks very much, Zulfia. Let's turn to our peer commentators. First, we can start with Amanullah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the interesting topic in the presentation. There was one question that raised by Zulfia, and I wouldn't repeat that. I just want to say that it's also good to also include interviewers who are engaged with technical issues, because you cover some of those issues in your research. In regards to your main research question, it gives an idea that the capacity building or development process is started from 2001 till, but when you describe it, it wasn't until 2014 that the control wasn't taken over to Afghan authorities. So the question is, was there any capacity building or development efforts before that? Since 2014. If not, then probably you may think to frame the question somehow represent that issue. And also, I couldn't think of any other problem that civil aviation might have other than what you have listed. So it might be something that the topic should reframe somehow to show the overall problems of civil aviation, not only capacity building. But if you focus on capacity building, it also wasn't clear to me whether you focus on human resources in capacity building and also institutional capacity building, because the failure after 2021 withdrawal of foreign forces wasn't human resources only, it was the systems that they had control over. And by their withdrawal, they took the systems with them. As it happens in other organizations, we did have data management systems and and information systems that were developed within 2 decades. But with the withdrawal, they took over the control of the system, maybe for very legitimate reasons, security issues. But these institutions are facing severe challenges because of lack of those systems that they were relying on. And also regarding more generally about a donor perspective and locals perspective, when you're discussing the amount that was invested in Afghanistan reform of institutions, that would be different when you look at the perspective of foreigners and compared to those who were actual beneficiaries of those investments and reforms. It wouldn't be 56 million or something that you said from local authorities' perspective who were benefited from them. So it might be good to consider that when you're looking at the literature. I'm not sure if you can find any studies or literature that were done by Afghans who could also reflect on these issues. So this is important because lots of literature about reform efforts in Afghanistan in 2 decades are Western focused, and they tell us that there were billions of dollars invested in Afghanistan, but locals don't see that in fact. So these were some points, but overall I enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Amanullah. Now let's turn quickly to Mustafa.
Thank you so much. First of all, it was very insightful research. I really enjoyed it, and it was really connecting practicality with theory. But my question is regarding the comparative perspectives. How do you compare Afghanistan situation with those countries similar in post-conflict countries who received support, international assistance on their civil aviation, like Bosnia, Iraq, which I haven't seen you have touched upon. At the same time, I will be really keen to know if you have looked into the accountability and governance perspectives, that how much Afghan government, Ministry of Transport and Civil Aviation have taken accountability and responsibility over the management during 20 years, because it is quite easy to oversimplify it. But since in Afghanistan everything is interconnected with each other, I think if to touch it onto that aspect will be really making the research outcome strong and reliable. And in terms of the participants, however, I think I haven't catch that, or you have not provided info on the background of the participants you have interviewed. But it would be really nice to have views of technical expertise, like pilots, those who had senior management roles within the civil aviation sector in Afghanistan, both from inside and outside. And I'm unsure if only while there is a saturation thing within qualitative interviews, but I don't think, I think considering the 4 big airports there was, and the so much thing happened, if 16 participants would be enough to rely on the findings. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Mustafa. So at this point, I would like to turn to our audience. If anybody likes to ask any question, please raise your hand or write in the chat box. If not, I think we can turn to Fawzia once again, if she likes to respond to any of the comments or questions raised by our other panelists.
Thank you very much for your comments and for your insight. I'm quite sure that it was really important and very, helpful for my research. First of all, I would like to mention here that it was a very, very brief and short part of my thesis and dissertation. It was not all of my thesis. And absolutely, I had to say why I choose elite, why the 16, and some discussion like this. But there was not enough time. Absolutely, I wrote all of these things on my methodology chapter. The reason I focus on elite interview is due to the nature of my research topic. Since, I'm examining the key obstacles to capacity development in Afghanistan civil aviation sector, it was essential to gather insights from individuals who were directly involved in policy making, implementation, and oversight of capacity development. Actually, my Afghan interview were all former minister, head of, the deputy minister, and all of those people who were directly engaged with the capacity development program, and also directly were engaged with the international organization or foreign countries were involved in Afghanistan. And they had, the better insight, as I was working in the leadership part, I was better understand that, that the elite or the policymaker were more engaged in capacity development compared to other, the low-level people in, working in civil aviation sector. I want to just to jump into the Mustafa's question that why 16, after, however, the number is only because, after gathering insight from different Afghans and international civil aviation experts about the, my topic and research, I figure out that, from some point, all the points that they mention as the challenge and problem are going to be repeated, and I didn't gather some very new insights and some things that very new. And after, 16 or 15, some things was, constantly was repeated by the interview. That's why I decided to stop their insight and the problem and challenges. And there were any question? Ahmadzai, sir, what was your question? Sorry, I didn't get your question.
The question was, wouldn't it be good to reframe the topic to, because I found your presentation more comprehensive to include all majority problems of civil aviation. Why capacity building only, or why only human resources? Because it could include everything. Wouldn't it be worth to reframe it that way?
But I'm thinking about this one. However, I need to mention here that, after the Afghanistan collapsed and all the airports collapsed, I was in the UK and I was thinking, excuse me, what's happened? After a huge investment, I was witnessed that how every day the foreign people is coming and going into the ministry, and why, what's happened, why? And when I was asking from one of my friends, some of my friends who were still inside Afghanistan, what's happened to Afghanistan that collapsed? They said there were nobody inside the airports to take the control of airports. And I said, what do you mean? Do you mean there was not a human body to do it? Or no, there was not, there is human body, but they were not able to do the airspace and air service management. They said both of them. Some of them were evacuated by international, and also in the meantime, we didn't have enough capacity because the international organization decided to hand over everything to Afghans until 2014, but because of lack of capacity, they couldn't do it. And it seems the main challenges was the lack of capacity. And I say, okay, the lack of capacity, but what was the challenges and why after the huge investment is still Afghanistan doesn't have enough capacity to, do under air service management and airspace management. And I'm going to, find these challenges in front of capacity development programs in Afghanistan civil aviation sector. However, I will keep your point on my mind, and I will think more about this one. And thank you very much. Thank you everyone for your really kind comment.
May I just a small comment and a very, very brief question? Fawzia, this is a very useful study, and I think I'm sure is going to contribute to the wider literature on the post-conflict societies, in general, and the aviation in particular. You can absolutely ignore the question if you don't like it, or you don't want to address. I mean, I'm not going to be offended. Just say, let's say, if the current regime, proposes that, we are happy to introduce reforms and anything in order to get the people who can contribute to capacity building through knowledge. How would you like to see that reforms steps?
Very good question. But as I figure out, based on my interviews with many Afghan and international, the low salaries was the most important issues in retaining the people who get back from training. For instance, one of my interviews interestingly mentioned that he was German. He said that we were competing to hiring people with the Taliban. Taliban get them $400, and the Minister of Transport paid $100 to a traffic controller, and it was a huge compete between us, the foreigner and the Taliban. And they say that it is a very big challenge. I think the low salaries in Afghanistan is very, very important. But I would like to answer another question about the generalization. However, some of the challenges and problems that I found here is might not directly related to the civil aviation of Iraq, for instance, as a country that also experienced international intervention, but by passing the people in other sectors like the security sector in Iraq was very common that we can use that one. The second things that I found during my data analysis that the international countries, foreign countries and international organizations sometimes intervene to other countries. They set up some machine over there without teaching the local people to how to use them. And when they leave those countries, all these things will remain untouchable and without using. Exactly the same things happen in Afghanistan, that they install and set up some radar inside Kabul airports and Kandahar airports. But when the international community withdraw from Afghanistan, and nobody can use those things. And we can, generalize these issues with the other countries as well, that I figure out in some African countries, the same things happen there. And also, focusing on infrastructure to legitimate and visible activity rather than to invisible activity for the foreign countries is one of the main challenges that also I found it in some literature and reported earlier. And I can generalize it in somehow with different countries and different aspects of the international intervention to other countries.
Okay, Fawzia, thank you very much once again for this insightful presentation. Our time is up, actually. So I would like to thank once again to Zulfiya, Mustafa, and Amanullah for their useful comments, and also to everyone who attended the session. And finally, I would like to add that the Global South Network warmly welcomes PhD students from any discipline and any part of the world to share their projects and receive interdisciplinary feedback. Anyone interested in presenting their work or participating in a session can contact Dr. Mohammad Raheal, the founder and convener of the Global South Network, at the email address provided in the chat box. And the next seminar is scheduled for 26th of March next week, Wednesday, again, from 3 p.m. onwards UK time. Further details will be communicated in due course. So I'm closing the session. Thanks to you once again, and take care. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day.
Bye.